My Inner Knowing, empowering you to find your compass for the journey. We are dedicated to supporting you to rediscover and trust your natural ability to navigate life each day by sharing insight and experience through the lens of two professional communicators and their guests. We intend to prompt internal inquiry that supports all those willing to explore a unique path.
Nancy is a licensed marriage and family therapist, supervisor, and consultant in the greater Boston area in Massachusetts. She has a strong conviction in human resiliency. Her philosophy is that personal challenges provide opportunities to reclaim power, identity, and healing. Her work has included experience in an array of different clinical settings and training with experience working with adoption, couples, trauma, and a variety of family issues. Nancy has been a practicing therapist since 2007 and is just as excited to support others in finding their own personal path to healing today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy, wonderful life to spend some time talking to us today.
Of course. You're welcome. I'm excited.
Yeah, good.
And I haven't seen Walker in a while, so it's a little bit of a extra bonus.
Oh my, thank you. Well, that's a great way to start off the talk.
That's right. It is. So yeah, we're actually seeing each other by Zoom, even though this is an audio podcast, and it is so nice to see you. And I'm so looking forward to seeing you in person on Friday. Yay.
Hey.
Oh, it'll be so wonderful. So thank you for joining us and spending time talking about your inner knowing, our inner knowing, this experience of becoming more aware of our internal experience so that we are, living a life that is more intentional than before. And so for me, one of the things that I want guests to share is, as best you can describe, what do you feel like is your experience of your inner knowing? What does it feel like? What awareness do you have? Do you feel it somewhere in your body?
I think that for me, it's less mystical than maybe how I perceived it to be. This notion of inner knowing. For me, it's kind of like finding myself again, and sometimes the experience varies depending on the context. So for instance, sometimes my inner knowing could be this sense that, my boundaries were kind of nudged or kind of crossed. And then there's an experience of emotion and anger and, that's that part too. And then there are other times where it's kind of like this, like peace.
Yeah.
But I would say, so it depends. It varies depending on it's dynamic in a way because life is dynamic, I think.
Yes.
At least that's how I am understanding it to be, that it's not just one experience, but it's kind of like, a fuller experience. It's not just like, like beams coming from the sky. And it's like, I know, what I'm supposed to do. I mean, if it's like that, sometimes it's great, but it usually is more of a varied experience. And I think the common the common thread in all of those is this feeling of this sense that I'm being true to myself.
Oh, that integrity. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Integrity to self. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you remember, was there a time in your life where you feel like there was an event or a shift, something that propelled you into being more aware of your experience?
I don't know if there's one event that propelled me or that I just kind of like noticed it, and have noticed it throughout my life. So for instance, the earliest that I can remember is disagreeing with, the big people in my life, the adults. Right?
Sure.
I don't even remember how old I was. I must have been like 4 or 5. And I had heard somebody whistle. And I just thought that was so cool, like, oh, wow, you could make that sound with your mouth, if you purse it. So I started to practice it and I wanted to see if I could do it.
Sure.
So I started to like get just a faint whistle. Like I was starting to get successful at it. And my grandmother caught me and she said, "Oh, girls don't whistle."
Oh,
and I thought, no, but I didn't say that to her,
sure.
But kind of like to myself, I was like, do I agree with that? And I was like, I don't, because it doesn't make sense to me. Like it just didn't make sense to me because I was like, but why? Like I'm succeeding at it. There's nothing physically preventing me. Like it was just obviously, at that stage of development, you're very kind of like matter of fact, very literal, but yeah. I was aware of myself kind of like testing that thought.
Sure. Sure.
So I was like, do I agree with that? I don't know. I don't think you're right, but I was very, I kept that to myself because there was also an awareness of some sort of like hierarchical, structure. There was this awareness of power differentials,
sure.
Even at a very young age. So I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to test the waters here.
So, Nancy, did you give up whistling or did you just do it when you were away from grandma?
I did it. Yep. I did it away from grandma because, it was fun and interesting and, and maybe that's also a part of my personality. Part of my essence is that I am a little bit of a rebellious spirit. So yeah.
Well, I'm curious.
I was like, well, I'm gonna do that.
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, that's not everybody's experience,
right?
If my own experience would be to go to shame way beyond 5 years old, even, and then I would have stopped the whistling. Oh, that's not the right thing to do. And so I'm interested in how you carried that. I mean, it's an amazing memory that you have that much detail at how it was that you've carried that forward. This, when you talk about part of your inner knowing is knowing when I'm being true to myself. And that sounds like a perfect example, right?
Yeah. How did I carry that forward? I think I carried it forward because not obvious to everyone, but if we just look at life in general and no one is without struggle.
Right.
So, as I grew, things were hard. Things were hard. And I felt like when that part of me, that liked to find truth and like to experiment and like to kind of like figure things out, or just, not have that shame about like just knowledge, just wondering about life like that. When that was against cultural norms, it was either I paid for it, and by people around me kind of like shutting that down. So in those instances, I think I, just like the whistling, practicing the whistling, that part of me was shrouded, like I privately had had my own kind of like just, somewhere where it was safe. Right. So it wasn't like I disappeared that part of me. I carried it by keeping it to myself, that it didn't feel safe to explore or express that with others. So it was kind of like a learn by way of experience. However, there had been traumas that have happened where that completely did get invisible to myself. So I can think of, without going into too much detail, but, just kind of where it was too much, like the forces and the powers that be, I just couldn't fight as a little kid. There was no power that I had actually physically, emotionally, psychologically, and, also from a survival perspective, needing, children need adults more than they need children, from a survival perspective.
Sure.
Right. So
absolutely.
So when that became too overwhelming, and I couldn't have, like my own little rebellious experimentation, something light as whistling, when the stakes got bigger and people wanted to completely shut that down, I really felt powerless. And after events or series of events like that, there is a disappearing even to myself.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was a period of time where I had maybe hidden that part from myself or denied that part of myself for the sake of belonging, and for the sake of survival.
Sure.
And what happened after that, is basically clinical depression, and
because of denying
I was depressed.
Denying your essence, basically, as a way of saying it. Do you think that brought that on?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like denying, your very essence.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like telling the cat to be a dog.
Sure.
Sure.
Like, yeah. And that fundamentally was, it was as if I could not exist, and when you don't exist, what is there? Right. Like, so that was kind of like my question in life for a long time was, is this as good as it gets? Like, is this what life is about?
Yeah. Sure.
Survival, So it was like my life just became very dull, very small. Does that make sense?
It does. How long do you think the period went on? From, when you start hiding from yourself and then all of a sudden it becomes reality. Now you don't even see yourself. And so you're in this period of time, and I'm assuming you were able to find yourself again. So I'm interested in that process.
Yeah, many years, I would say. And I just want to add too, it wasn't like from those years, it was pure dullness.
Sure.
There were pockets of moments where like I would, kind of pop through,
Yeah.
and then it was like I would come up for air a little bit, you know? I don't think that I could have survived those years without having moments of like that to just pop through, take a deep breath of air because I was kind of underwater essentially.
Yeah.
If we were to use that metaphor.
As I was listening to you to share that, what I was imagining in my mind was when you were talking, Nancy, about the conversation with your grandma, like you took it and you hid it in your pocket. And then Walker, when you were sharing, I was thinking, oh, that's really about needing to forget that it's in my pocket or emptying out my pocket. And, I can't even have evidence that that's, that's there. Right. And that, shift into not allowing myself to remember or to see or to search. And you talk about the clinical depression, that comes. Right. Who am I?
And that's the shame.
Yeah.
Needing to get rid of the evidence.
Right.
Like there's something fundamentally wrong with my existence as a human.
Yeah.
Right.
My particular way of being, my particular, set of chromosomes, my particular way that I am, how I breathe, how I move. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's I just want to hug your little girl, to tell you the truth. That's rescuing, I know, but it's like, it's really touching because I have some shared experience. I'm not saying I walked in your shoes at all, but it's very touching. So it's touching something in me to hear that denial of your essence, yourself. So knowing you as I know you now, however, I don't see the gasping, coming up to the surface and gasping for air. It's more like there's, flower that's blossomed is what I think. And I know it's not constant because that's not life, but a whole different experience. So can you tell us a little bit about coming back into a knowing of your essence, yourself?
Yes.
That's such a there's so many kind of routes I could expand on.
What's the first one that comes to you?
Oh, the first one that comes to me.
Yeah.
Well, the first image that came is like when you talked about blossoming, a couple of images blossoming. I think about, during the pandemic, I had gotten into gardening and learning about how things grow. And, there's this metaphor that people say, I think there's even a country song like bloom where planted, right? Isn't there a country song? There must be. There's a country song about it. But just kind of like bloom where planted, right? So, I think about as I like garden, and not everything will bloom where you plant.
Yes.
And it's such a metaphor for the pressure it's like, resilience, no matter how hard life is, no matter how the struggle is, you can overcome, like that whole, I don't know, just that culture of like, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, like Like there's something fundamentally wrong with you if you don't bloom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The truth is, I didn't bloom for a long time, for all those years. And I was made to feel wrong for that. But really, the soil was bad.
Yeah.
It lacked nutrition, you know, if we were to use that metaphor.
Yes.
You know, my family of origin is, you know, as much as they did so well to provide for me, provision does not assume relationship.
Correct.
You know, so you can have families that have really, you know, at a fundamental level provide for you. And anyone looking into our family would be like, wow, you had this, you had that, you know, like, you know, but it did not represent some of the more, you know, really kind of invisible, you know, but fundamental essentials of what it means to have a nutritious environment to grow, right? So I think about kind of like really what helped me was an environment change. You know, like I needed to not make myself wrong for not being able to bloom, you know?
Yes.
Like it's kind of like, you know, I work with families and, you know, kids, and, you know, part of my work is also with adoption, post-adoption work.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the blame gets put on the children, you know, even the disorders that we place on children, attachment disorder. Oh, they have reactive attachment disorder. But really, you know, attachment is actually, it's actually a relational diagnosis.
Yes.
Right. You know, what's the attachment context with the adoptive parents?
Sure.
So look at the context, look at what is the, I'm getting into more case, but if I were to look at myself, you know, that environment made sense. It makes sense to look at, you know, for me, and that I couldn't blame myself for being a quote unquote late bloomer.
Yes.
You know, like I'm blooming now. And that's because I'm getting nutrition.
Yeah.
I'm finding environments that, you know, fuel growth, development, fuel like a healthy way of being, fuel more expression of who I am as a person, you know. So that's one thing that I think about, you know. It's I think of the Alice in the Wonderland, right? Do you remember that cartoon from Disney?
Yes.
Alice in the Wonderland?
Yeah.
The queen demands everyone to paint the roses red. I want red roses. Paint them all red, you know. So they have all these workers that paint the roses red, but the roses are white, you know? So my definition of blooming is just like existing as you're supposed to bloom, you know. If you're a white rose, be a white rose. Like be, you know, enjoy the glory of what it looks like to be a white rose. If you are, you know, a peony, you know, be the peony, be fragrant, don't get painted. You know?
When you think, Nancy, about what you were sharing about being provisionally provided for versus relationship, and the relationship that you have with your son, who is now 9 months old, how do you, what's that process like for you when you think about how you were raised versus how you want to raise your son? And what is it that you feel like you want to provide him? What do you want his experience to be? I mean, as best we can, right? Because we're very complex, but I'm just curious what that experience is like for you.
I think just attunement, you know, being attuned to him is what was lacking. sometimes there was attunement. I'm not saying there wasn't any attunement, but how I am, and I know that I'm not always going to get it right all the time.
You're not.
Right.
Yeah.
I just, as a parent, I can pretty much tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess I am interested in what he is, what he is going to look like, what he's going to be curious about, like I'm interested in discovering who he is in the process. And I think that is different.
Yeah. When you share that, it brings to mind a saying that I heard years ago, and I don't remember it exactly or who said it, but it was something like, as a parent, my role is to learn the song that's in my child's heart and remind them of it when they forget.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much in that, for me, like being attuned to them, providing space for them to explore, finding it what it is, and knowing that we all forget in this world of so of so much, that we are exposed to in the stories that we create.
Mm-hmm.
But allowing that song to change too as they grow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a story, if you remember, Teresa, about this tribe in Africa where the mother, when she's pregnant, will go out and she creates a song for her child. And that's that child's song. And the tribe then learns the child's song. And when they stray from the course, whether through childhood or as an adult, instead of severe punishment, etc., everybody gather around and sing the song to remind them of their essence. And it probably doesn't, when you said, well, you have to allow for change in the song, changed it a little bit, but I just think it's a lovely concept for what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
Yeah.
What are you thinking, Teresa?
Well, I'm thinking about, the my inner knowing piece, right? And, as a parent, like I remember, different conversations, with my kids over the years. And I think about, choices that they would make or, friends that they would have. And this, came later, it wasn't, with my older kids, it was with my younger kids. But this, I would say, in regards to that person, this, like, let's say they met somebody and they would say, I met so-and-so, we want to go do this, blah, blah, blah. And I would say, okay, what is it that you like about that person? What is it that makes you want to be friends with that person? And I know that it was irritating because often you don't know, right? We're just, for whatever reason, right? I liked the shirt they had on today. I don't know. And I would say, I just want you to know why you're doing what you're doing. I want you to know why you're choosing what you're choosing. It doesn't mean it's what I would choose for you. It doesn't mean that I even agree or, like it, but I want you to know, why you're doing what you're doing. I want you to know what that process is, inside of you. And so what was coming up for me when you were talking was just how, as parents, we can have so much influence on what's happening inside of them, but it's really a projection of our own story, not
not their song, not not their knowing, right? Like I think, about like retreats we've done, right, in the past, babe, right? Whose voice is that, right? Whose voice is it, right? Is our knowing my voice? Is it my voice? Or is it really the voice of someone else? So the question about when you're getting clear, as clear as you can about making a choice, how do you get clear that it is as best you can your choice?
For me personally, it's taking a step back, getting quiet, sometimes removing myself from the environment that I'm in that is causing me to feel confused, and kind of quieting the noise of social pressures is really helpful for me, because in my experience, I think that's when it gets tricky, is in relationship, because we do want to make people around us happy. We want to feel like we don't want to upset anybody,
right? Right.
And maybe at a base level, it's also part of surviving, is to, in some ways, conform. Is everyone kind of comfortable, with me being here? Because we can't survive on our own. We need each other. I think it does get tricky. And for me personally, kind of taking space and removing myself to get clear is a really important process that I have learned that helps me. Yeah.
When you think about the journey for you so far, are there specific resources that come to mind that you think were helpful for you, whether that was a teacher or a mentor or a book, or things that you felt like were significant aha moments for you?
That's the part I didn't get to in my
That's okay.
Can you rephrase the question?
So,
or
are there any teachings or books or mentors that you felt like were supportive to you on this journey of seeing yourself more clearly, learning what it is that's helped you get to this place?
Well, the ones that come to mind, it feels random in a way, and maybe because I'm kind of just thinking on the spot, but maybe that's kind of where we find the answers. But I'm sure the list is not limited to what I'm thinking about right now. But it's so funny. Like, I think about a math teacher.
Oh, yes.
He was just so, I think it was just my experiencing. Like, I think that was most impactful, is just being with people who allowed for me to presence myself. It's not overt, right? It's not, I mean, I didn't, because it's so random that I'm thinking about this teacher. But it's not like we've had this open, conversation about it. It's not like going to therapy and it's like, okay, this is the space where I get to say whatever. And, it's supposed to be non-judgmental and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But it was just like this vibe, I got from him that he accepted me, and he just saw me even though he didn't know everything about me.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of makes me a little emotional thinking about it. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think really, above like any kind of like didactic teachings or like books or any kind of seminars that I've been, I think it's those moments, when people kind of just where you experience like, it's okay, it's okay to, I accept you. I'm curious, like, about you. Like that feels, there's almost like no, prescription to that. Like it's not a regimen that I could advise. It's just an experience that, feels priceless.
Yeah.
Does that?
Oh, absolutely, Nancy. I mean, I'm teary just as you're saying it, because I think, yes, exactly. Being seen.
Yeah.
Accepted. Someone that can just hold space for you in whatever your you-ness is, right? And it's just okay. And you don't feel in your mind or your body like, I have to change something to be okay right now. Because I think often we're in that space of how do I have to adapt to, and I know this can sound exaggerated, but survive this situation, right? But how can I adapt so that I'm not rejected or abandoned? How about that?
Yeah. Yeah. Or shunned.
Yeah. Oh, no, I feel that. How about you, babe?
Oh, yeah. The not enoughness piece, I guess, that we all carry. And having those moments where, to use your example, the gardener just, waters the white rose and loves it for exactly what it is with no expectation. Just you are. Ooh.
Yeah.
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 How do we get there more frequently is what I want to know. Or should we?
Into those opportunities of being with people.
Well, of having the experience that Nancy's talking about. I mean, is it just a random piece of life? Oh, I got lucky this decade and, ran into Mr. Smith, who saw me. He saw me. And there was, I didn't have to do anything. How do we get there? That's a big question.
I have a thought is that I kind of love that. Actually, I think his name was Mr. Johnson. I kind of love that. It's not a guru, it's not like a book that I can direct people to, because it feels kind of like, people would want that, right? Like there's this kind of, it feels nice to have a name, have a book to, find on Amazon, there's like some action step that I can take. So it's a little more uncomfortable sitting with this idea of like, how do we have that experience? And yet at the same time, we can have that, anybody can have this experience. Anybody. And it's like, it's kind of like it can happen at like 30 minutes from now. Like you can have an experience, you can create an experience for somebody else,
Nice point.
And yeah, it makes me think of like the magic of life.
Yeah.
That's what makes life worth living is that it's not prescribed, Yeah, it's the mystery and magic of life. You can have this today.
Yeah.
Whoever's listening, like, you could experience this a few minutes from now.
Mm.
You know, I think the real answer is probably that we don't need Mr. Johnson. You know, ultimately, I mean, it's lovely when that happens, but if we're working on ourselves, and if we're spreading that, you know, giving that to the world, it probably brings us to a point where we experience it more often, just because of ourselves. What do you think?
Well, I think Mr. Johnson's necessary because it provides us the contrast to even know that it's possible.
Sure.
Right. And Nancy, what you said, it is so lovely because it is so uncomfortable, but it really turns the focus back to us doing our own work.
Mm-hmm.
And what it makes me think about is how difficult it is for us to seek out new relationships that support having the experience, whether it is we are offering it or receiving it. What I feel like we often do is we can try to create this experience with others that maybe have a different desire than we have. And I think often what happens, we get a little pushy about it, you know, wishing that person would have that with us, as opposed to risking being uncomfortable and exploring other relationships. And I'm not just talking about intimate relationships. I'm talking about, you know, friend relationships.
Yeah.
Where we can, I don't know, experiment together, you know?
Yeah. That really resonates. I think about all those, you know, moments in my life, like touch points where I had those experiences is because I was exploring, or I was curious, or I was, you know, for whatever reason wanted to, or felt safe enough to take a risk to try something new. And I go back to that metaphor about bloom where you're planted. You know, if you stay in the same environment, you don't have the exposure of different perspectives or different ways of relating and worldviews. And it's no,
he's just talking. Yeah. He's like, "Mom, it's been an hour. Come on."
Yeah. What's happening? Where are you? Yeah. Yeah. So I think that resonates. There is this, you know, like that question I had asked when I was like depressed, right? Is this as good as it gets? You know?
Yeah.
And it's like a good question, right? Because it's like, it provokes curiosity. You know, there's like a doom and gloom aspect of that question too. Like, this sucks, you know, where I'm at, and this feels like hopeless, but is this as good as it gets? I wonder, right? Like that wonder, it, you know, propels me to seek and find something different.
Yeah, there was, Nancy, I wish I could remember, and hopefully Walker remembers what he said. But when we did the retreat a few weeks ago, there was something you said, babe, about, was it Betty that asked you a question about your life? But I remember you sharing that. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Sure. I mean, Nancy's listened to the podcast about Betty, but when it had been 33 years or whatever, she said, "Well, how was your life?"
It's like, whew, that's a big question.
And I'm not at the pearly gates. I'm 55. And it is a big question. how is your life?
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
I mean, there's the undertones of, did you do what you wanted to do? You know, did you live it the way that you really wanted?
Right.
It's a lot.
Yeah. They're short questions, but they're big questions. Right. Is this it?
Yeah.
And how and how is your life? You're like, whew. Yeah. And do they motivate us? Right? Do the questions motivate us to then step into the uncomfortable or the unfamiliar? Or does it motivate us to risk doing something different? Well, it definitely motivated you.
Yeah. It motivated me to explore and end up meeting you at the retreat.
Yes.
And explored, just, keep exploring and growing. I think I may have stretched my limit with with our son.
Yeah.
And maybe with Nicola too. So I'm gonna maybe just end with how much I appreciate. One of the things that I really appreciate about you and our friendship is just this kind of like one, curiosity.
Mm.
You know, we were always just kind of like, oh, what does that mean? We were curious.
Yes.
Also, there's this, we saw beyond our limitations, you know, our humanness, our messy stuff, you know. And I love that about you, and I love you.
I love you too. Thank you so much, Nancy, for spending this time with us. We know it's so valuable.
Yeah.
And again, so excited to see you all in a few days.
Can't wait.
Thanks, Nancy, for sharing.
Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to explore life with you. We encourage curiosity, self-growth, and we strive to be more compassionate every day.